Hello friends, I'm pleased to welcome you for this Google Hangout session where we'll provide you an overview of eCAAT and SoftCAAT. Let me first start with a small presentation of what is CAATs all about. I'll share the screen with you. Let's have a quick overview of data analytics or CAATs. This is the agenda we would like to cover. One is the concepts of CAATs. Second, the key features of CAATs. Third, we'll look at the key features of eCAAT and SoftCAAT. And fourth, we'll look at the question and answers. Let's go ahead with the concepts of CAATs. CAATs refers to computer-assisted audit techniques. These are the tools and techniques which facilitate auditors to increase their personal productivity and enhance their effectiveness. CAATs can be used not only for audit, they can also be used for any type of an assignment which involves analysis of data. CAATs are software tools which are used primarily by the auditors. Using these tools, you can access, analyze, and interpret the data, based on which you can draw inference, you can draw insights, and you can also draw hindsight and foresight about what the data is all about. CAATs are tools and techniques. CAATs can also be used in Excel, and there are also specialized software such as eCAAT and SoftCAAT, and ACL, IDEA, etc. Why do we need to use CAATs? You know, most of the data available now is available electronically, and the internal controls are embedded in the information technology systems. Hence, it becomes important to evaluate the IT controls which are embedded in the internal controls, which are embedded in the IT. So you should know how to access this electronic data, review the internal controls which are embedded in IT, and this is where CAATs could be useful. Audit is primarily a process of collecting and evaluating evidence. If the evidence is available electronically, it's important that you need to access and analyze this information and gather appropriate evidence so that you can come to the right conclusion. Now let's look at the audit cycle. The audit cycle consists of 5 phases. First is the planning. Next, you have the field work. Then you review the data, and then you prepare the report, and you can also have a follow-up. CAATs can be used at each of the stages as required. In the planning stage, you can use it for performing the analytical procedures so that you can scope the audit, you can do a risk ranking, and you can identify which is the information or which is the specific area you would like to audit. And in the field, you have to know how to collect the data as required. Once you perform the tests on the data which has been collected electronically using the audit software, you should know how to review the findings, perform the sign-off after discussion with the management, and you prepare the final report. Let's look at some of the key features of CAATs. They say the key differentiator between a skilled and unskilled professional is in knowing how to use the right tools as relevant. You know, most of the professionals have a toolkit, and the toolkit consists of various tools. It's important that the professional knows what are the tools, where they can be used, and how they can be used. CAATs are specific tools which can be used by auditors for auditing electronic data. So it's important that you know what are the different types of tools and the techniques for performing analysis of electronic data. This gives you an overview of how to use CAAT. If you look at this slide, you have the client data, which is in different environment. It could be in a SAP, or it could be in a custom-made application, or it could be in Tally. Now, most of the software have an export format through which you can export the data to well-recognized formats such as Tally, or it could be used in Excel or text formats. So the first step in using CAATs is to convert the data into a well-recognized format, which is usable by the audit software. This could be Excel, this could be database using ODBC, or this could also be in text format of flat files. So you convert the data of the required files which you're auditing into a commonly accepted file format, and then you import the data into SoftCAAT or the audit software and then do the analysis. Now this gives you an overview of the audit tasks and how CAATs are related to this. You can use CAATs at the time of planning the audit. As I said earlier, you can identify specific documents or procedures you're going to audit. You can perform tests, and this test could be the compliance test to review the controls at a macro level, and you can perform the detailed test, which is the substantial test, where you perform or re-perform the computations based on which you report the findings. What is most important in auditing electronic data is to understand the IT environment. You need to understand the applications. You need to understand the data. The most important thing is to understand what is the format in which the data is available and what is the specific data which is required for your audit. It's also important to know what is the information architecture of the enterprise. And this information architecture of the enterprise is the one which processes that information of the enterprise. The applications which are used within the enterprise could be developed in-house, or they could be standard off-the-shelf applications. They could be simple standalone applications, or there could be large and integrated applications. Whatever be the type of applications, whatever be the type of data, it's important to know what is the structure of the data. What is the data which is required? Once you know what the data which is required for audit, you need to get that data in the acceptable format and you can perform the audit. Now this gives you an overall perspective of the approach for using CAAT. First, you identify what is the audit objectives. What is that you want to accomplish through the audit? Is it a tax audit? Is it a compliance audit? Or is it an internal audit? Is it an information systems audit? CAATs can be used for various types of audits. Based on the audit objectives, you prepare a list of the test objectives, the various types of controls which need to be tested. You'll also identify the data. What are the data to be tested? You identify the specific tools and techniques which are going to be used for testing this particular data. Then, most important, you'll perform the tests as required. While performing the tests, it's important to remember that the tests have to be dynamic based on the analysis of the data so that you can draw the right inference. You evaluate the evidence, you review the findings, do the risk rating of the findings, based on which you prepare the final report. This is the audit cycle or the approach for using CAATs. Now this gives you a sample process flow of the sales cycle. Now it's important to know the cycle of the flow of the transactions pertaining to any specific area before you use CAATs. For example, in this case, you look at the sales cycle. There is a sales order from the customer, based on which you have the pricing of the material for the customer. We do a material check to check the availability of the materials. We also do a customer credit check to confirm whether you can provide credit to him. We dispatch the goods to the customer. Then there are finished goods which gets updated. We do the invoicing for the customer. Then finally, we collect the money from the customer. This is the sales cycle. Now, there are controls which have to be verified at each of these phases, at each of these areas, at each of the places when the task is performed. So when you're using CAATs, you should be able to identify at each of these areas what are the controls which are required and validate whether these controls are working as envisaged. For example, you would like to verify the customer check credit availability. You can also perform a test where you can check, are there any credit limits which have been exceeded? If you look at the general audit software, these are software, also referred as GAAS, which can be used to directly read and access data from various database platforms. This could also be used for accessing data in flat file systems or in ASCII formats. The key features which are available in the Generalized software are mathematical computations. You can reperform the computations to confirm whether this computation is correct. You can also do stratification, statistical analysis. You can do functions such as sequence check, duplicate check, etc. Now let's say you have to prepare an audit program for auditing electronic data using CAATs. The first step is to set up the test objectives. So you identify what are the area you're going to audit, and based on that, you set up the test objectives, and you'll also decide the testing methodology. This is going to be part of your audit program. Now, this is a sample criteria which you can use for auditing application controls. When you're auditing application controls, what are the criteria we need to evaluate is the completeness of the data. So here we check whether the application processes all the transactions and the resulting information is complete. Second, we have to check for accuracy. So here we're looking at whether all the transactions are processed accurately and as intended, and the resulting information is accurate. Third, we check for validity. Fourth, we check for authorization. And fifth, we check for segregation and duties. These are some of the sample criteria which in audit for verifying whether the controls are available, they're adequate and appropriate. What are the different types of tests which can be performed in CAAT software? So here I've given a sample listing of about 26 types of tests which can be performed for auditing electronic data. I'll show you a demonstration of some of these features when I show the demo of the audit software. For example, you can do aging test, where you do aging of the inventory or aging of the data. You can do an attribute test. For example, data should be positive only. So you can identify data which have correct balances. Authentication check, whether transactions are genuine, which means you're checking whether all the attributes of the transactions are available. You can also verify the authorization, which means you're verifying whether all the transactions above a particular limit have been authorized. You can do a correctness check, where you verify whether all the data which has been entered is correct and also complete. You can also compare the data with different files by joining them. You can also do computation check, compliance check, consistency check. So these are the different types of tests which can be performed. I'll show some of the tests when I actually work on the data. Now let's look at some of the key features of eCAAT and SoftCAAT. Any CAAT software has certain capabilities, and these are the basic capabilities. One is the file access, which enables the software to read the data from different record formats and file structures, which means you should be able to import the data into the audit software, especially if it's a general audit software. You can reorganize the data by indexing, sorting, or merging or linking with another file as required for the purpose of your audit. You can select the data by filtering and picking up the relevant information. You can also perform various types of statistical functions to get an overview of how the data is organized and what is the overview of the data. This is also called as profiling of the data. And you can also perform mathematical computations to verify whether the data has been computed correctly. Some more features of CAATs are a drill down analysis, which means once you got the report from the CAATs, for example, you've done an aging analysis or you've done a stratification analysis, you can double click on the result and you can drill down and get to the details. This will help you to isolate red flags or identify exceptions. You can also do an exception analysis, and you can perform this analysis on 100% of the data. For example, you want to pick up all transactions which are about 20,000 rupees in cash, or you want to find out all transactions where the credit limit is exceeded. So this test you can run on 100% of the population and identify the exceptions. You can also do a file matching, wherein you compare two sets of files and identify the discrepancies. For example, you verify the vendor master with the vendor transactions to identify are there any purchases made from vendors who are not in the authorized vendor master file. Now this gives you a key list of the key functions of a CAAT software. I'll show a quick demo of most of these functions which are in the CAAT software. So you find there is the aging. You can also append. You perform Benford law. You can classify the data based on specific criteria. You can identify duplicates. You can export the data from the CAAT software after you've done the analysis to any specific format, such as a text file or an Excel file or a database file or a flat file or XML file or HTML file. You can also extract data as required. For example, you'd like to extract all cash expenses of a particular category about 10,000 rupees. You can also use the eCAAT filter. You can find information based on specific criteria. You can also stratify the data. You can also do a sequence check or a duplicate check. I'll demonstrate these functions, then I think it will become much more easier for you to understand. Now let's look at two software which you would like to show today. One is eCAAT and second is SoftCAAT. The key menu options which are available in eCAAT are utilities, data, analysis, sampling. Then you have worksheet commands, workbook commands, and you also have help, which has the guidelines and getting started. Then you have SoftCAAT, wherein you get the functions which are available are importing files. You have data menu, analysis menu, sampling, scripting, scheduler, and you also have analytical tools. Let's get a quick distinction between the features of eCAAT and SoftCAAT. As you see here, eCAAT is an add-in to Excel. It has the benefits and the limitations of Excel. It's simple to use because if you know how to use Excel, you can use eCAAT. In fact, eCAAT in many ways is simpler than Excel. You can use all the other features of Excel within Excel, such as charting or pivot table or any function of Excel you can use on the data which you already analyzed in eCAAT. SoftCAAT is an independent data analysis software with its own database. The limitation of the size and the speed with which the data can be processed is based on the capacity of the computer. It is simple to use, but it requires certain learning. In fact, audit software is supposed to have the simplicity and ease of use of Excel, but the power of a database. You also have specific functions in SoftCAAT, such as rerun tasks, scripting, and scheduling, which are not available in eCAAT. You also have a list of analytical tool functions which are available in Excel, but in eCAAT, they are not added because these functions are already available in Excel. But in SoftCAAT, you have a host of analytical tool functions which can be used. To summarize, you need to remember what will be the type of audit, what will be the area of audit. If the data is available electronically, it can be altered. So it is a potential candidate for applying CAATs. You need to remember that CAATs are powerful, but they are tools only. They help the auditors to focus on high-risk areas, perform systematic in-depth analysis of the data, and isolate transactions that have symptoms of or a high potential for fraud or any type of a risk. There is no doubt that computers are definitely faster at many tasks, but they are only tools, and the auditor has to use his judgment and skills to be able to draw inference from the data. This gives you a snapshot of how audit software or CAATs can be used. You define first the scope of the audit, based on which you decide what are the criteria based on which you're going to perform the audit. Are you going to perform tests pertaining to completeness, correctness, accuracy, or availability, or compliance, reliability? You define the specific criteria which you're going to evaluate, based on which you decide the type of techniques you're going to use, the type of tools you're going to use, the type of tests you're going to perform. So CAATs is what you're going to use there. And then what you analyze is the digital data or the electronic data. And once you've done the tests, what you will find as a result is the audit findings. Based on the audit findings, you should be able to do a risk analysis and come to a conclusion whether you are able to provide assurance to the management. The concluding slide, you need to remember that you need to move from the era of ticks to the clicks. And wherever there's a mouse, there has to be a CAAT. And CAATs are supposed to be the audit tools for the digital decade. So it is the essential part of the toolkit of the auditor. So if you have any questions, you can post it on the chat section. Now let me give you a walkthrough of the functions of eCAAT. When you open eCAAT, this is how it will appear. So you'll find most of the menus are disabled. You click on, we have added a sample data. You click on the sample data. It has a list of files or sheets which are open. For example, we have the sales trans here. Now you click on eCAAT to access the functions of eCAAT. You find there are different menus, as I said earlier. Utilities, you have data, you have analysis, sampling, worksheet commands, and workbook commands, and also help. The first thing you should do before you understand or before you start using eCAAT is to use the guidelines. We have standard guidelines. The guidelines are available here. When you click on help and you click on guidelines, this will open the guideline file. Now, this is a brief explanation of the eCAAT functions. Okay, let's go ahead. So we have opened the guidelines. Let me open the guidelines and show you where the guidelines are. Okay, this is my menu. Guidelines and knowledge map of eCAAT functions. Okay, so if you see here, there's only one page that will give you some simple points. The key points are, you need to remember that the first row has to be heading, and each of the columns should have an appropriate heading. Empty rows is not a problem. Undo feature is not available. And in the read-only files, SoftCAAT will make a copy of the files and work on this. You may find that some of the cases, the menus may be disabled. In that case, you should know what is the reason why the menus are disabled. What you could do is you can open another sheet and come back to the sheet. You will find the menus could be enabled. You'll find most of the cases, the first row is excluded because that is considered to be the header. Okay, this is the guideline. You have a quick look at the guideline to know what are the features. Next, now let's look at the functions. Do you have any questions as of now? If you have any questions, you can post it in the chat. And are you following me as of now? Okay, let's go ahead. Let's come back to the software. We already gone through the presentation. I will just go to the specific area where I want to show you the functions. Okay, I said key functions of CAAT software. Key functions of CAAT software. These are the list of functions which I said I'll show to you. Okay, let's go ahead. Now with the eCAAT, we're in the sample data. Now let's have a quick walkthrough of the specific functions. The utilities menu has various functions, and these functions are pertaining to converting the cells. So which means you can convert a specific cells or a set of columns. Here primarily you have two type functions. You can remove various types of anomalies with the data. You can also convert the data to specific characters as required. Format cells is where you can format the data as per your requirements. Alignment is where you can wrap the text out of it, columns or merge selected cells, or also wrap margin out of it. You can also draw border, which is similar to what is there in Excel. The reason why we have provided this in eCAAT is you don't need to go to Excel. You can perform this function directly in eCAAT. The most important function is utilities is the find and replace, where you can perform various types of find. For example, in this case, I want to find value 15,000, and I specify where I want to find. I want to find this value in sales. Okay. Once I've given this, I click on find. eCAAT will process this cell by cell and give you a list of all the values where that amount 15,000 is available. And by clicking on that particular cell, you can go to that particular row where this information is available. Okay. So now the advantage of this find is whether it's in a row or a column, all this would be highlighted. Not only that, you can also view this data and extract this data as required. So you find this find is a little different from the find which you have in Excel. Similarly, you can also find all values. So here, let's say I want to find Anita. Okay, I'll say find. It finds me all places wherever Anita is there. So it means if I am finding, let's say, conveyance or mobile charges, now whatever be the account, and I'm checking testing on finding on the narration, whatever the account is, it will be able to find that information. You'll also find it finds Anita in all places. It is not an exact match. So it means if you got multiple information which is there, you can also find that information. Next, you have the find and replace. You have arrange. You have to use a specific sample data for this. So I'll skip this for the time being. Similarly, you have functions which are pertain to near, normalize, similar. You also have find by rows, by values, by replace multiple, etc. Global find and replace an important function, which is also very dangerous because you can replace data in multiple files at one shot. You have to be very careful because this can replace the specific value, whatever you identified, in all the files in the specific directory. So we always suggest that you make a backup of the data. Now this is a utilities function. In the utilities function, you also have some common functions like if the date is not properly formatted, you can format the date. Next, we have the reverse polarity, which means the sign which is there, you want to replace the sign value plus into minus and minus into positive. You can do that. Next, we have swap delimiter, which is comma and full stop you want to swap, you can do it. This is generally applicable when you have some data where the commas are not properly given or the full stop you want to swap with the comma. You also have move minus sign to front. For example, minus sign is given at the end of the file and you want to move this, you can do it. For example, let's say you got a data where the debit is given after every transaction, credit is given with every transaction. You'd like to replace the debit with positive and credit with minus. What you could do is you can replace debit with plus and credit with minus, and then you can use the swap delimiter so that it will come, minus sign will come in the beginning of the character or the numerical. Then you have the function which is fill selected cells, which is we are already aware this is available in Excel also. You can also extract the visible cells. For example, if you have hidden some files and you extract only specific files, you can extract those specific files. You can also transpose selected files. For example, you're doing some analysis, you'd like to see the rows in columns and the columns in rows. You can just select and use this function. It will transpose the particular data. Okay, these are the utilities function. Next, now let's come to the most important function, which is the data. Now in data, let's say I want to pick up the first function. You see here when you're using this function, there's also tooltip available. So you can just take the cursor to the function. You'll see the tooltip, which will explain to you what is this function all about. Let's have a quick walkthrough of some of the key functions which are in the data menu. When I click on the top or last X, I want to find out the top sales and I want to find the top 12 sales. Okay, and then I click OK. This is a result window you'll find in eCAAT. Most of the results are provided in the result window, or in some of the cases it is also added in a separate sheet. Now you have a list of the top sales, and these are the 12 items which are the top sales. Now once you have got this information, you can also click on a specific row and you can also sort it. These are the common functions which are there in the result window. on any particular value you want to click, it will sort it automatically. Not only that, in the result window, you have this option where you can just give the name, a particular character that will be selected by default. So let's do the top class function and let's do the bottom. And let's say I want to pick up the bottom sales and I want to have a summary this time. And I want to pick up the last 20 items. Okay, I click on OK. So I'll get the result. Now you find the 20 columns are given. It also gives you for each of the items how many number of times the item has come or appeared. For example, the sales item 500, the number of counts is 26. The sales item 750, the count is 26. A single click, I can get this information. Okay. So this is the bottom. Not only that, there's one more important function which is there of the result window, that is drill down. We can double click on this and you can extract the specific information. So these are the key features which are there in the result window. Now let's look at the next function, which is sequence check. Now I want to perform whether all the transactions are in a sequence, and I want to apply this test to the invoice number. I selected the invoice number and clicked OK. Now I'm doing a test of all the 6,000 plus records which are there, and gives you a list of the functions where the sequence is missing. For example, 1035 invoice number is missing, 1158 is missing, 1455 is missing. Like that, it gives you a list of information. Now, can I double click on this? You can't double click because this is a missing invoice, which means this record number itself is missing. So you can't drill down on this. Okay, let's go to the gap test. In the gap, I have different types of gap tests which you can perform: numeric, date, or character. I want to perform a test where I want to find the gap in the invoice numbers. Now we saw missing invoice in the sequence, but there could be multiple missing sequences. So I want an interval of 1. Some cases you can also say the interval could be 30. For example, rent I pay on a specified date, then I give a gap of 30 days, and based on that, this test can be performed. Now you see the difference between the sequence and the gap. The difference you see here is in the gaps, you also find multiple gaps. And if the multiple gap is there, it will also give the range. For example, earlier you saw sequence 1035. Sequence 1035, its range is missing once, whereas 2002 to 2003, these two invoices are missing. Now let's perform one more test, which is the duplicate test. Identify duplicates, and I want to find duplicate in the invoice number. So I can get the details and I can get the summary. I can also decide whether I want to select all the fields or specific fields. Now I perform the duplicate test. Now you see what will be the number of records. eCAAT will run through this and will give you the result. Okay, now there are 24 duplicate invoices. For example, if you see here 1034 is the duplicate. 1454 and 1454 is a duplicate. Okay, so what will be the number of duplicates these are given? As said earlier, when the result is displayed in the result window, you can also perform specific functions which are available in the result window, such as you can sort the data by single clicking on the function. You can also select a specific item of data. You can also perform, let's say, filter, pick up information. I want to pick up all transactions which are above 25,000 rupees. I can pick up that information. Okay, so you see how easy it is to use eCAAT. What you need to know is how to select the specific function. Let us perform one more function, which is the eCAAT filter. Let's understand what are the features of the eCAAT filter. You click on the eCAAT filter and click on the dynamic filter and just see what happens. The results which are there in the eCAAT sheet are displayed in the result window, and this result window is available as a dynamic filter. So you had 6,666 records. All these records are available dynamically in the dynamic filter. What is meant by dynamic? Now, dynamic would mean you can dynamically query and pick up relevant information. For example, I want to pick up all transactions which are done by REA. I click on REA and I find there are 764 records which are done by RA. And in RA, I want to pick up all transactions which are done by Anil. Okay, so you got 2 transactions which are done by Anil. So this is how you can query and pick up information from the dynamic filter. Let's say this is the cash book, and I would like to pick up all transactions about 20,000 rupees or about 50,000 rupees. I click on 50,000. I find there are 773 transactions out of the 6,666 transactions which are pertaining to above 50,000. I can also pick up transactions of a specific party. Let's say I'm picking up transactions of arrows, so I get this information. Everyone who's starting with FIR. So you'll see the beauty of the function is you should know how to use this function, and once you got the data, you can analyze and drill down as required. Now this is the dynamic filter. Now let's look at a function called stratification. Stratification, if you look at the tooltip, says you can group numeric data into different strata based on a specific interval. How do you perform the stratification function? You click on numeric. Now it gives you the numeric fields which are available. Here you got the invoice and the sales. So there's no meaning in doing stratification of invoice numbers because they're in sequential order. The field total is the sales, and it is identified by default. The minimum value is 500 and the maximum value is 2,26,500. I can decide the increment value by default is given as 22,600. I can decide whether I need to retain it or I can modify this. I, for the time being, decide to retain it. Then I fill the intervals, and what I do is I say OK. Now let's wait for the result. You'll find all this data pertaining to these transactions would be stratified and organized as per the strata. So you have the first strata where the data starts from 500 to 23,099. The difference is 22,300. You remember 22,600. Second strata is 23,100 to 45,699. The third strata is 45,700 to 68,299. Like that, it organizes the data as per different strata based on the data available, and it gives you a profiling of the data in terms of the count and also the percentage. So you have the count of the sales, you also have percentage of the count of sales, you also have the sum of the sales and the percentage of sales. Now, based on this, you can get a quick overview of how the data is organized. And whenever the data is available in the result window, we said you can also drill down. For example, I'd like to pick up this documents which are pertaining to sales about 90,900. I double click on this and I get the list of all this information. Okay, now just see the stratification can be used for inventory, can be used for data, or wherever the set of data is there where you want to analyze based on a value or based on a period, you can do a stratification. Let's perform the stratification based on the date. I select the date. Okay, this can aging analysis for data. Let's say I've got the field to stratify is date. Field total is the sales. Okay, period type I would like to do is dates. Now it gives me the data from 1/4/2011 to 31/3/2012. It also gives me the increment value. I'd like to have the increment value is 45, and I say autofill. So it has actually filled the data. So it means it's going to stratify the data from 1st April 2011 to 16th May 2011, 17th May 2011 to 30th June, and so on till we reach the last date, which is 31st March 2012. I say OK. Now you'll see the same data would be displayed now, stratified based on the date. So you have the first category of sales, which is the first 45 days, where the number of transactions 1,201, and the percentage in terms of date is 18%, and the value of the sales, and also the percent of the sales. Based on this, you'll know, based on each of the 45 days, where is the maximum sales and which is the minimum sales. Now, as selected 45 days, you can select based on whatever date you want. And as I said, you can also drill down and pick up relevant information as required. You also have stratify based on the characters, and you can also do stratification based on the key field. Now let's go to another important function, which is classify. Classify, if you look at the tooltip, says groups and totals numeric data based on the count value of the selected character field, which means classify works on a character field But for performing the classify function, there should be a numeric field also for which you're going to do the totaling. So here, I would like to do the classify based on the name, and I want total of the sales. Okay, which means I'm actually generating a data statement in terms of the sales which are made to the party. I can also do group by. I'm not doing any group by as of now. I can also put a condition where I can say I want this classification for all transactions above 50,000. Let's come back. Let's do this function. I say okay. I will just see the result. What happens? You will get now a list of all the parties as per the name with the count and the percentage, and also the value of the sales and the percentage of sales. Now, when you see on top, what do you see? You see there are blanks, which means there are two transactions where the name of the party is also not available. Now, you'd like to know who has made the maximum number of transactions during the year. You just click on this count of name, and the data is sorted automatically, and you find Richard is the one who has made the maximum number of sales, which is 28. I would like to review what in terms of the sales, who is the customer who has the maximum value of sales. I click on this, I find Suman is the customer, although he has 23 transactions. The total value of sales of his is 5,78,870. Now this gives you a quick overview of all the transactions as per the party. Let's say I have the sales data here and I'm going to classify as per the month. I can get the summary of the sales month-wise. I can also get the summary of the sales as per the party. So any field which you have, you can classify. Let's do one more time. Let's say I want to classify based on the user ID. I would like to know which are the users and how many transactions they are done. I do the total of sales. I click on OK. You know what to expect as far as the result is concerned. What do you see here? The beauty of the software is when you use audit software, you will get the results immediately based on which you can draw the inference. CAATs are also called as data analytics. So the data is processed and provided the information. The analysis has to be done by the user. Now, when you look at the first row, you find there are 10 transactions which does not have a user ID. So you know there is an issue with this particular software because it can allow transactions without the user ID. Now, how this happened, what are the causes, you have to investigate. But you would like to look at this transaction in detail, and when we look at the documents, you can double click on this and you can select those documents. So you know which are the invoice numbers which have not been entered by any user as per the system, which means it has a blank user ID. Similarly, when you look at the transactions, you would like to look at what is the number of transactions that are done by each user. You click on this, you find AS has done only one transaction, MA has done only one transaction. So based on this, you can find out what is the reason these users were created and why they have done only one transaction. Are there any user IDs who have just been created and after that they have not been used at all? So in that case, these users may not be active, which means they have to be disabled. You also find, based on the transactions, that SA is the one who has done the maximum number of transactions, which is 3,406. So it means more than 50% of the transactions are authorized by SA. So you have to check as to what is the reason he is doing so many transactions. Now we have seen the classify. Let's do the next function, which is outliers. Outliers, now if you look at the function, although you may not know what is the outlier, I would suggest still just perform the function, look at the result, or look at the menu options, you will be able to understand what it is. You also have help. And when you read the help, you should be able to get understanding of what the function is all about. Outliers, as the name signifies, is identifying values which are beyond a particular boundary. Okay. In this case, we would like to find out transactions which are 3 times the average. Okay, and this is in terms of the sales. So this will help you to identify transactions which are beyond normal or which are beyond the average. So it gives me a list of all the transactions with the difference and also which are beyond the particular normal or the average. Now let's look at one more function, which is aging. Aging we already performed. We can also said we can also do aging based on the group by. Now let's come to the next function, which is out of values. Out of values by bounds. Now this also looks a little peculiar. What is out of values by bounds? But just look at the function, perform the function, you'll get an idea. Let's say I'm going to perform based on the sales, and I have to define it. Identifies sales. The characteristics of sales is it has 6 numerics. Okay, I would like to pick up all transactions which are 5 numeric, which means not equal to 5 numeric, which means I'm picking up all transactions which are 6. So you find here all transactions which are not equal to 5, which means anything more than 5 or less than 5 would be picked up in this function. Okay, you also have MIS function. Let's look at the MIS function. MIS I'm going to perform based on the date. For MIS function to be performed, it's important that the date field should be available. I pick up MIS on sales. I click OK. You find by default the month was chosen, and that's why we got the result. I'll show you the month function later. So you see for each of the functions, each of the month, what are the sum of the sales, what are the average sales, maximum sales, minimum sales. You get this information based on which you can actually do a VAT audit for each of the month of the sales, whether the sales have been correctly recorded. You can verify. Let's look at MIS once again. So here I selected date, I selected sales, I go to MIS. Now it also tells me what are the functions you want to perform. You wanted the sum, average. I'm not interested in the average or the minimum. I just want the sum. It also tells me what is that I want to perform. Okay. So earlier you remember the result was month. Now I'm going to give day of the week. Okay. Let's look at the result and see what happens. I'm getting the transaction totaled as per the day, which means how many transactions happened on a Sunday, how many transactions happened on a Monday, Tuesday, etc. So as per the weekdays, I can know. If the business is not going to do any transaction on a Sunday, now using the function, I know how many transactions happened on a Sunday. Not only that, I can drill down and pick up those transactions and look at who has done the transactions and why those transactions were done on a Sunday. Similarly, you have a summarize function. Summarize function, you have something called the quick summarize. Quick summarize, you do on the sales. You accumulate based on the sales. Okay. Now let's look at the result and see what happens. So here I found for each type of sales, what is the total count and what are the total sales. You also have totals where you can do the count, sum, or the cumulative total. You also have various types of statistics. I'm not getting into the details for this. You also have advanced statistics, advanced functions. Now let's go to a few other functions. Let's say sampling. In sampling, the functions are very simple. You have systematic sampling. When I click on systematic sampling, you find you can select sample based on the interval or based on the records. I say I want to pick up at random 12 records. Okay, this is what statistical sampling all about. So at random, it picks up 12 records. Now, next time when you perform this test, are you going to get the same result? No, because the results are going to be picked up at random. You also have stratified random. In the case of stratified random, what we do is first we do the stratification, and based on the stratified data, I pick up exact number of samples required. So the objective in the case of stratified sampling is to provide preference to high value data. The number of samples could vary, whereas in random sampling, each of the population has the equal opportunity to be picked up. You have various functions in the worksheet commands. Now let me show you a few key functions in the next 5 minutes. Before that, let me just see if you got any doubts. So are you with me as of now? Okay, so there's no response. I assume you're able to follow as of now. Let's perform a few more functions. Please remember, this is only the first of the series of sessions. We'll have more sessions as we go on. I've just used only one file. We can also use multiple files. Before I go, I thought let me show you one important function, which is identify sales. Identify changes. Identify changes can be used for finding out difference between two files. Assuming the cells and rows, columns, everything is supposed to be same. So I can selected sales 2013 and sales 2014. I want to pick up what are the changes between the two. I want to display only the new sheet records. And I want to identify sales that have changed. And I wanted them highlighted in particular color. I say, okay. Now you see, it gives the comparison between the two files, row by row, column by column as per the cell, and highlights cells which have changed. Now you see the menus are disabled here because this is the first time this file was created. Let's come back to sales transaction. I want to show a few more functions before we go close for the day. Relationship is an important file where you can join two files. Now here I have got, you're going to join two files, the sales transaction, and there is an authentication limit. Okay. Now before I do this, let me show you the original file. This is the sales transactions. And here you see there is a user ID. And here you got the user ID and the limit, which means for the sales, which are the user IDs and what is the limit. And I want to join this. What do I want to do by join? I join the files and I want to find out. Now we have the user ID is equal to user ID. Okay. And these are three options available. Only match records from both the tables. Records in the primary file, not matching the secondary file, which means transactions which are available in the sales transaction, but there is no user ID, or records in the secondary file not matching with primary file, which means user ID was present but has not done any transactions. Now I would like to first check records in primary file not matching with the secondary file, which means there are transactions which have been entered which are not available in the user ID master. So you find there are 763 records of transactions which are done by who are the parties who are there. All the transactions are by MM. 749 transactions are there. I want to pick up sort based on this. I find it also includes the blank transactions. There are also transactions by AR and AS. So these are the transactions by user IDs who are not the authorized user IDs. Let's assume this is the vendor master. So this is a purchase file. You got the vendor master and you have transactions which are entered by purchases made from other than the authorized vendor. Now let's look at the authorization limit here, authentication limit. Now you find the user ID is MM, whereas there we have the user ID as MM. Okay, so this is the relation. We have different functions. You can also do a compare function. You can also append the files. We'll not get into the details as of now. You can also query by value, which means you can query the information and pick up relevant information. For example, sales where the column is so and so, I can select and pick up the data. So the best thing to learn eCAAT is to have a quick walkthrough of each of the functions, read the tooltips, followed by reading the help file. Just perform the functions and you will know how this works. So if you know how to use Excel, you should also be able to know how to use eCAAT. What is important is not just using the tool, but also its practical application. Before I close this, I want to show you one more function, which is the index sheet. Okay, index sheet will give me a list of the files in an index. Quite often as an auditor, I get a list of files and there are multiple files which are there. And it creates an index with the link. Okay, so all the files which are there, all the sheets which are there in this file are given with the link. It also gives a summary of the information which is available. Okay, so we have given you a quick overview of the functions which are there in eCAAT. If you remember, I showed you a document. This document is available. This gives a list of all the functions which are available in eCAAT with a brief explanation of the eCAAT functions. So it's important that you just have a look at each of the functions, know what are the specific functions and how do they work. Most of the eCAAT functions, it's important for you to select that function, click on that. So you need to select, click OK, select the specific fields and get the result. Once you got the result, you should be able to analyze the result and come to a conclusion. Now let me do a quick comparison of eCAAT and SoftCAAT. If you remember, I said SoftCAAT is the independent data analysis software. Data analysis software has the power of ease and use of Excel. The data analysis software are specific software, or they're also called as generalized software, which can be used for auditing any electronic data. If you remember the slide I showed you, you can import data from any Excel or a flat file or from a database file. If you're auditing, let's say, an organization who's using SAP and you're auditing data, you can go to the particular option, export the data file from SAP into Excel format, and you can import that Excel format, and then you can use eCAAT, where you can open that Excel file, or you can use SoftCAAT. Now, if you see here, I've run through most of the functions. Benford law I have not covered. Maybe I'll cover this in the next session. Now, if you look at these options, you find here in SoftCAAT, one of the important things available is import data. Now, when you import data, you can import data which are in a standard PC format. This could be MS Excel or MS Access or delimiter files or a HTML files or DBase or Lotus 123 files. Or you can also import from the clipboard, or you can also import using ODBC. Okay, let me show you one import. I need to identify the file which I want to import. I've already done some analysis and picked up one file which I want to show. Okay, this is the sales register which I want to import. Or let me pick up the sales register. I open this file. Okay, it gives me this one file, which there's only one sheet in this. I click next. I can also go back. I can also see the preview of the file to get an idea about how the file looks like, what are the data which is available. Okay. I click next. Okay, it gives me the complete list of the fields which are available. I can also apply a condition. So totally there are about 501 records. I say next. I want to pick up everything. I say start. Now this data is being imported. Now it's already done. I find this is a sales register which is there, and I imported all the files. Okay. Now one of the important functions which is very simple to use but is very effective is the sorting. Now in this case, in the case of eCAAT, we have seen sorting can be done as it's a function of Excel. In the case of SoftCAAT, to double click on that particular field, it'll do the sorting. Now when you do the sorting, you find there are fields which are blanks. Similarly, you have something called the cutoff concept. If you look at this particular data, so you know the total number of invoices is 501, and the starting invoice is blank, and you know the beginning invoice number is 1, and the ending invoice number is 501. Similarly, when you just do a double click on the account name function, you should be able to get the result in ascending or a descending order. Okay, there seems to be an issue in this. Let's see. Okay, there's some issue. We'll resolve this later. Let's come back to this. So you have this information. Now, if you look at the function here, so we saw the import. Similarly, look at the data. Now, data you see there is a sort and filter, top last text which you saw there. Similarly, you got the sequence check, identify gaps, identify duplicates, and you also have the tools. Similarly, you have the analysis function, which has got stratify. You have seen stratify earlier. You can classify the data. You can summarize the data. You can also find out MIS. You have the totals, and you also have advanced statistics. Similarly, you have relation that you can join. You also have sampling. In SoftCAAT, you also have documents where you maintain a log of all the transactions, all the audit which you've done. You also have standard templates which can be used. You also have some tools, and you also have scripting function. In tools, you also have scheduling function, whereby you can schedule the functions as required. So this is a quick overview of eCAAT and SoftCAAT. The objective of this presentation was to get you started so that you can explore the functions. Once you explore the functions, I think we can come back with specific clarification. In the next broadcast, we can look at specific functions where you have got doubt, and we'll discuss this. Before I go, I just want to show you one simple function. Let's say in SoftCAAT, I want to find out statistics. When I click on statistics, it gives me a quick overview of all the functions of this called as the data profiling. It gives me an overview of the statistics of that particular function. For example, what is the population in January, February. So based on this, I know if there are any null values in this. You also have what is called as the cutoff concept here. So based on this, I know what is the end date and what is the begin date. So this means this shows clearly whether all the transactions which are recorded are for the year or within that particular accounting period. I can also get MIS at one shot. Okay, this is as far as SoftCAAT is concerned. Okay, I'd like to know if you got any questions. If you got any questions, you can email me. So thank you very much. I hope you had a quick understanding of what eCAAT and SoftCAAT is all about. Thing for you to do when you're using eCAAT or SoftCAAT is to explore what is available in terms of the features and start using it. Okay, thank you very much. You can also email me. So based on this, we can discuss further, and we'll schedule the next broadcast based on your feedback. So thank you very much. Bye.